sunny spaces, smiling faces, happy places. But every sunny space holds a shadow. Behind every smile are sharp teeth, and every happy place has something sinister lurking just below the surface.
Welcome to We Saw the Devil, the podcast diving deep into the chilling realms of true crime. Join your host Robin as she unravels mysteries that have left investigators baffled and armchair sleuths obsessed. Be forewarned, dear listener. We Saw the Devil is not for the faint of heart. Our unflinching exploration will take you to the darkest corners of the psyche and through the unimaginable depths of human darkness to unearth stark secrets to the harsh light of day. Nothing will be left untouched. Are you ready? Are you sure? We saw the devil.
Hey guys, it's Robin, and I'm here with episode 14 of the Chris Chan Saga. We're getting into some pretty insane stuff in this episode, some explicit content as well, so this is definitely not to be listened to in the presence of children. But yeah, super excited. How have you guys been? Took a little bit of a break this week, doing some home renovations, painted my office, did some other stuff. Usually in October, I do the 30 horror movie challenge, 30 movies in October. I think I may have eked out 4 this month. I have been so busy that I just haven't really been able to do anything that I typically do in the month of October. So how have you guys been? Are you excited for Halloween? Are you excited for Halloween? Have you watched or done anything in preparation? Do you have your decorations out? My house is basically Halloween year-round, so not a huge change there, but definitely feeling in the season. Other than that, I guess quick Chris Chan update. Online, Chris has posted a couple videos this week. He's doing this series, and I've said that I'm not going to cover it, and I'm not. I'm personally not interested in it, and if you are, I'm sorry. I'm just not, and I can't force myself to watch this. It's a Christmas story that Chris is doing. Chris has written out this entire story. He supposedly began this while he was in jail, maybe wrote the whole thing, but it's basically the Christmas story, like, the one of baby Jesus and being born and blah, blah, blah. It's the exact same thing, but it's kind of talking about like his second coming, because this is where we are now in Christory, apparently. It's a combination of Chris reading in front of a green screen and then showing full pages of his animation and the Sonichu characters. I mean, it's absolutely crazy stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to really delve into that. Iris has been taking one for the team and watching them. Can't say as though I'm interested. I love craziness, but this is the level of batshittery that I don't even think that I can accept. As you know, in one of the other most recent videos that Chris posted, he admitted that Flutter, who we now know everyone was previously calling Egg or Cabbage Patch, or in my case, Cabbage Snatch, that she met Chris, that she wrote to Chris while Chris was in jail. Speculation now that Chris is living with this person. And I think that this is probably confirmed, and this is something that's being speculated. And again, going to have to provide a little extra context because we haven't gotten this far into the story. So in more recent years, Chris ended up hooking up with this person named Caden. Caden started a group called Prater, which supposedly was college age, like business people, and they would manage talent and internet talent and stuff like that. I mean, it's way deeper. We'll way eventually get into that. They basically offered Chris and said, hey, we can make a mold for your medallions so that you can mass produce them. The TLDR of it is that Chris ended up working with them and they kind of acted like Chris's handlers. And they are some sketchy fucking people. They are clearly out to take money for Chris and ride him, use him as a cash cow. The other day, Chris did a live stream, and it was bizarre. We'll get to that in a moment. But in the middle of the live stream, Chris's phone rang, and he answered and said, oh, hey, Caden. So it seems potentially like this group of people is still behind live streams. Maybe that explains the increase in quality in Chris's content and streams. Chris clearly has a gaming PC. I'm not sure if he's using like OBS Studio or what he's using, but he has a professional stream and reaction and stuff up now. It's going to be really interesting, but it does kind of confirm the theory that Chris is being handled by someone, and most likely that someone is the Prater team. So I wonder in that case if Flutter, this new gal pal, is part of that. I'm guessing likely so, which gives it a 50-50 shot of troll user or actual girlfriend, actual sweetheart, as it were. Only time will tell. But anyway, let's continue on and get into it. And I'm particularly excited about this episode because 2014 as a whole is actually my favorite year outside of the classical era. Classical era being with Casey, Liquid Chris, Julie, and that time frame. Alec Benson Leary at the very, very, very tail end of that. And in the last episode, I left off with the house fire. Remember, the trolls put together $1,000 care package for Chris, and then Chris began the grift of selling autographs and signed artwork. Also, Chris had finally come out as a quote, lesbian identified tranny crossdresser. And we ended the last episode in August of 2014. So going back a couple months, Chris had actually put up a new OkCupid profile in the middle of July. And Chris quickly matched at 97% with a girl by the name of Catherine. None of the trolls, followers, fans, whatever, no one following Chris Chan knew about it. That is until Chris could no longer keep it inside as per usual. And Chris included a quote, I have a girlfriend with his handwritten notes to people who bought his autograph or signed artwork. It was like, sorry, this is late, or, I've been super busy hanging out with and getting to know my girlfriend. And if you've been listening thus far, you know that Chris has claimed a lot of sweethearts. So, of course, everyone was like, oh, hell no, here we go again. And most of Chris's followers told him that, hey, your sweetheart is likely another troll. Some even accused him of paying a sex worker. Chris, flustered by these accusations, made a Facebook post that said, I want to make something very clear. My girlfriend and sweetheart is very real. She is not a hooker or prostitute, and I certainly am not spending money on hookers or prostitutes. The sweetheart Catherine was kinda real. At least she was a real person. It's unknown as to whether her name was actually Catherine, unlikely, but she was actually a troll and followed Chris's antics online. So Catherine talked to Chris for about 4 weeks before they eventually decided to meet up for a real life date. And they did. And they actually end up going out twice. But we're going to talk about the first time. The first time was on August 31st. They'd made plans to have a lunch date at Applebee's. Now, Catherine actually brought another troll with her. She brought a guy named quote unquote Al, claiming that he was her cousin who had given her a ride because she was having car problems. And they had a pocket recorder and they recorded the entire date, over an hour long. Now, it is available on YouTube, but it was a pocket recorder. And so you hear 99, the volume is at like 98.9, the people around them. And they are very, 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 very low, but you can make out some stuff. It's available on YouTube. However, the most information came when Catherine made a post about the experience. Because the whole date was recorded and can be corroborated, this account that Catherine gave is probably the most accurate and legitimate account that we've had, up until this point at least. I approached the first date with Chris like most people approach online dating. You just set up some lunch or coffee date or some shit and see if you can tolerate one another without the computer screen. Except that I knew I was going to have to hand wave and tolerate an awful lot of crazy shit. Most of the early Katie interactions online were a lot like any budding online friendship via a dating site. When I started out, it was entirely on my own with no involvement from historical figures and trolls. I didn't expect to get anywhere. Most would-be trolls don't. So there was no plan for an in-real-life meeting since I'm too chicken to go it alone. When I got advice and help from other Christorians, that's when we put the idea together for a date. I think I did refer to it as a lunch date or something like that, but it was the same routine I've gone through from online dating before. I tried to keep the Katie interactions as normal as possible, as weird as that probably sounds. Chris wanted to spend an entire day together, go bra shopping at Target with him, and wanted me to spend the night and watch movies with him, even asked me what I like for breakfast so he could buy it. It would have been kind of nice behavior if it weren't the first time he was going to meet this woman. I told him a few times that I wasn't going to spend the night with him, but he persisted in believing I would. It took place the last weekend in August because it took a while to coordinate. By then, Chris had been chatting with Katie for about 4 weeks. My quote unquote cousin Al came with me so I wouldn't be alone with Chris at Applebee's. It was set for like 2 p.m. or something, but Chris told me he always likes to get there half an hour early for dates, all two of the ones he's had in his life. So we had to be there early so we could get there first. This is the rundown of the date itself from right after. 12:45, arrived in Charlottesville. We knew Chris would be there early since he said he was always early for dates, though he's had all of like 3 dates in his life, including this one. Took a few minutes to adjust before going in and getting a seat. Faced the door so we could see him coming. 1:10 p.m. Visual contact established. This is not a drill. Alice spotted him first in the car park and said, "It's either Chris or an ugly old woman." He looked right at us and I waved, and he sort of waved back but got seated separately because autism. He was 2 booths down. I bit the bullet and went over. He wanted me to use some shitty ass stupid pickup line like, "What's a pretty girl like you doing in a place like this?" But I just asked him if he was Christian. He all but leaped up and squawked, "Catherine, you're here." Then he side hugged me before I could employ evasive tactics, and I led him to our table. The look on our waitress's face was priceless. She may need serious therapy after this. Chris was wearing a red t-shirt and gray undershirt. His kilt, really some old lady style plaid skirt to the calf, with turquoise tights and grotty sneakers. I hoped he would wear high heels since he said he likes wearing them. His hair looked like straw, probably from the bleach he used to use, and he had a silver hairband and green earrings. He had on blue eyeshadow and purple eyeliner and red lipstick that appears to have been applied by someone with advanced He had on blue eyeshadow and purple eyeliner and red lipstick that appeared to have been applied by someone with advanced Parkinson's. And I just want all of you to know that I had to record that 5 times because I could not stop laughing. He smelled very strongly of what we later found out was that Britney Spears perfume. He shook Al's hand and used hand sanitizer. He seemed genuinely amazed I was even there. From 1:30 to 3:30. The day went really well. Chris had some trouble with volume control when we talked about jerk ops, and we asked a lot about his conspiracy theories. He thinks Mike Snyder bribed the police to beat him up and ran into their car himself, and there are still trolls making it impossible for him to get work. We pressed him for details on the corruption conspiracies because we wanted to see how depraved they were, under the pretense that he could sue for millions. But after he couldn't come up with the good answers, he just stress sighed, and we changed the subject. We asked after Barb's teeth. She has really bad cavities, apparently. The rental is secured through November, according to Chris. Chris expects Katie to move into 14 BC, which is shorthand for Chris's address, with him and Barb. He had previously expressed willingness to move to another town in Virginia with Katie, but he's either changed his mind or forgotten on both. Chris thinks Barb could handle little kids in the house too, when Al asked how he could have a family living with his mother. Chris thinks Barb would be a great babysitter and caretaker, so I guess there goes Chris's plans to be a house husband. He kept trying to hold my hand, so I negotiated lunch like a T-Rex with stumpy little arms. Then he tried footsie under the table, and he stared at my tits a lot. I kept hoping Cousin Al would say something, but he never did. In retrospect, I should have called him out on it. Barb's family apparently also think Barb is a useless drunken whore too. Note, a few days after the meeting, Chris told me that when Barb was young, she aggressively went after her sister's husband or fiancé. I think it might have been Cousin Harriet's husband, Tom. Anyway, the family concluded that Barb is a shitty person and pretty much wrote her off, except Aunt Corinna for some reason. Tom and Harriet still occasionally exchange pleasantries with Barb, but won't let her visit or even tell her their address. Chris now tips 15%. I gave the waitress all of my singles and wrote, "I am so sorry you had to see that. You're a trooper," on the check. 3:30 p.m. We were going to escape to the mechanic where Katie's car was, but Chrissy wanted to follow us. When he offered to show us 14 BC, we took him up on it. We followed him even though Al knew where we were going. Chris seriously drives like my demented old grandma who doesn't have a license anymore because she kept going the wrong way up one-way streets. Chris said, "This isn't how I imagined bringing a girl home. The place is bad. Much smaller than I thought it would be too. It's overgrown and there's broken glass everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's stuff. All garbage. Bob's old workshop is full of rubbish. His greenhouse is doing slightly better, but not much. There's an early 90s Cadillac in the yard covered in plant growth that hasn't been moved since the fire. They want to sell it and expect $2,000 to $5,000 for it. Al expressed interest in buying some of Bob's records, and Chris was pretty happy about that. More Lego money. 4 p.m. We go to the rental. It is literally stacked to the ceiling with stuff in places, no exaggeration. Chris occupies both upstairs rooms. One is full of Lego, including melted, warped fire damage Lego, a lot of it. And the other has his same grotty bedding from the old house. He keeps a picture of Katie on his nightstand and practices kisses on it. I should have told him that was creepy as hell, but at the time I was just way too stunned that he even had it there. He introduced me to Barb via an old picture. He kept putting his arm around me and getting creepy too close, so I kept moving around and fake sneezing. I thought it was because he's creepy. Al thinks it's his autism, but it's likely both. Funnily enough, he mentioned earlier that his experiences with Megan taught him not to do that touchy creepy thing. He was actually bragging about it. We looked at his yearbooks, physically handled them. He has 2 from his senior year. They smell smoke damaged, but aren't too bad. I never found out why he has 2 yearbooks. I think he said Barb gave him an order form and Bob also did. Nobody signed either. Chris seemed surprised at the suggestion that people sign yearbooks at all. Barb was actually very pleasant, but I know abusive people. The mask of normalcy is their cover. She said I was very pretty, and we chatted about family history and Cole nearly dying of a sinus infection when he was 19. Barb thinks the insurance agent hates her because she is, quote unquote, too smart for them and too shrewd, rather than being a cantankerous old harpy. The Chandler's pets pee and shit in the house on newspaper because they're too lazy to take them for walks. The dogs are untrained, hate strangers, and are at least 20 pounds overweight. Their bellies all but drag on the floor. One nearly bit me when I offered to let it smell me. When we made our escape, Chris said, "You asked what a girl like me was doing in a place like this? Well, I'm waiting for the sweetest, most honest woman in my life," and put his arm around me to kiss me, so I sneezed again to get him to back off. I waved at him when we got into the car, and he still thinks I blew him a kiss. He gave me a goodie bag of shit, mostly My Little Pony related. There were the 2 pictures he drew of me and the CD. There was a My Little Pony iPhone case because he also wanted to take me shopping for an iPhone to put on his plan so he could call me as much as he wanted. I turned him down, but he said I could regift it. No clue what happened to it at this point. Now, Catherine and Al also recorded their experience and interaction with going to the Chandler rental household, and that's also available online if you want to listen to it. It is a good bit clearer. There's a good bit of environmental noise like the Applebee's and the TV music when they end up getting to the Chandler household because a TV is going 24/7, but it is interesting to hear Barbara interact and talk to them. One thing to note, though, is that when Al and Catherine are leaving, Chris speaks to Catherine and says, "And you can just come back alone, you know?" Which, let's face it, is a little creepy. Just an hour after Chris's date with Catherine, on Facebook, Chris changes his status to in a relationship and announces that he wore a Britney Spears perfume to the date. On September 2nd, Chris actually writes relationship vows for Catherine, trying to basically rope her in and prove his love for her. You can find a video of this on YouTube. You can find the full pictures of the handwritten vows on the Quickie. Not going to go through them. On September 13th, Chris put up medallions for sale in his eBay store, $30 each. He received more than 50 orders in the first week alone. And to this day, this is still the most popular item on Chris's Etsy or eBay or any of his online stores. It's the medallion. Chris has made at least $5,000 in the last couple of weeks alone, in the very least. With Chris becoming a trending talking point once again, people are buying out all of his stuff on Etsy, which again is likely handled by the group Prater, and they're using Chris for money, most likely. So I implore you, please do not buy anything from Chris Chan. Not only are you supporting a horrible human being who likely diddled his own mother, because let's face it, Chris did in fact admit to it many times and alluded to it a month before he was arrested. Chris is not above doxing you. And even though Chris seems much more settled now, much calmer, heavily medicated at that, you don't want to get involved with Chris Chan. y'all do you, but just not a good idea. The month of September in 2014 was especially busy for Chris. He must have felt a new sense of community because he got super involved and supportive of the Human Rights Campaign. If you are unaware, the Human Rights Campaign, or HRC, is a LGBTQ plus advocacy group. Chris would leave Facebook comments on HRC's Facebook page, begging for their help with getting unbanned from the local Walmart. Because remember, guys, Chris was banned, is still banned from like every Walmart within an hour of his household. So Chris was begging HRC for whatever reason for their help in getting him a band, claiming that he's being discriminated against for his autism, for being a quote unquote tranny lesbian, the whole bit. Chris also ends up attending Charlottesville Pride. And if you think about that, that's actually a pretty cool and big deal for Chris. Chris had spent his whole life up until that point hating men for the most part, but super hating gay men. Absolutely just thought and claimed that they were vile and horrible, or quote unquote the homos. After Chris came out as trans, or in Chris terms, a quote unquote male lesbian transsexual, Chris's opinion, he still adamantly says that he does not like males or gay men, but he says he tolerates them and that he's okay with them. My personal theory in all of this is that Chris is most likely bisexual, and I'm not sure if it was because of Bob, Robert, his father, being so anti-gay. Bob did not like the gays. When Chris started acting a little bit tomgirlish, not, the full thing, but a little bit before Bob passed away, he used the word faggot in describing Chris. So I wonder if Chris internalized that and all of the body dysphoria that followed. And y'all, it's about to get real fucking weird, so hang on. So speaking of the gender dysphoria that Chris experienced throughout his life, I mean, hundreds of examples of him lamenting the fact that he had a penis. His quote unquote ugly appendage, his ugly member, or gross growth between my legs, as he once called it. And as a newly out trans woman, Chris decided to take matters into their own hands. On September 17th, the same troll who had dressed up in the pickle suit for Chris's date with Emily at the Fashion Square Mall obtained a screenshot of a comment that Kim Wilson left for Chris on Facebook on his wall. It read, "Hey Chris, how's your intimate piercing doing? Be sure to keep it clean. The gooch is hard to clean." Of course, everyone saw that and they were like, excuse me, but what the fuck, my good sir? So many people were talking about it and asked Chris about it that Chris had to respond. Here's what Chris said on his September 18th Facebook status. "Well, a whole half a month without a new update on the Trolls' website. I was hoping for longer than that. And I was going to make a public announcement about it anyway, but the cat is out of the bag now. Anyway, I had something done to me that is radical that I did for my lesbian soul. I got a new piercing on my taint on Monday the 15th, about where my clitoris would be if I was a woman. It is a short, steel, straight piece with steel spheres, of which I refer to them as my Un-clit. I am tending to its cleaning personally in daily baths or showers, as well as cleaning the area with rubbing alcohol twice daily. I, Christian Weston Chandler, with no outside opinions from anyone, have long been thinking about getting a piercing on my taint, with a steel sphere where my clitoris would be if I was born female, and my soul identity as a female and a lesbian, as a fair substitute for that, and to stimulate the woman's clitoris via scissoring. Years after watching the lesbian couple tribbing each other in the softcore porn movie, The Key to Sex. And for those who don't know about tribbing, it's more commonly referred to as scissoring. Tribadism is when one woman rubs her vulva against the other woman's vulva to stimulate each other's clitoris. In fact, there are clits that actually stick out, penetrating the labia and better stimulating the other clitoris. The female bonobo monkeys have long clits, and they trib other female bonobos a lot of the time. And to make sure everyone understands once and for all, I am a female, lesbian soul trapped in a male body. Or to put it another way, I am a lesbian transgender. I am seriously into women. Males offend me. Even my own penis totally grosses me out. I am glad that I tuck it beneath my taint so I don't have to look down at my old ugly so I do not have to look down at the ugly bulge. I have come out as a lesbian transgender that I always have been and ever will. And for every one of you sods who continues to mislabel me as a homosexual male or hint towards anything of that even in distasteful jest, you can all kiss my vagina of my soul. Have a good day. Yep, you all heard that right. Chris now has the quote-unquote Un-clit. Now, imagine just for a moment your current Facebook account. But imagine your high school teacher, your college professor, your mom's best friend, your aunt, maybe even your nana. And then imagine writing something like that and one of those people reading it. I just have no freaking words. Chris had elementary school teachers on his Facebook. He had like a college professor. He had a couple high school teachers and actual gal pals and people that he went to high school with. And then some trolls. Like, I have no words for that. Also, during September, Chris pissed a lot of people off because of his eBay, especially someone named Mr. Smith. Now, Mr. Smith had purchased a medallion from Chris's eBay store. Chris wasn't working to get the medallions made or shipped, so Mr. Smith filed a case against Chris's eBay account, like filed a dispute with PayPal. Chris absolutely lost his ever-loving shit, and he posted Mr. Smith's full name, physical, and email addresses on Facebook. Mr. Smith was obviously just some trolly internet person, but he did legitimately buy the medallion, and Chris was not providing the goods. So he told Chris that he contacted eBay, and Chris profusely apologized and then claimed that it was due to stress and exhaustion. Because, of course, anytime Chris does anything wrong, he can't take actual accountability for it. He just lashes out against the person that he's wronged and then makes excuses for his previous behavior. Chris did end up getting the medallion shipped out, but once Mr. Smith received the medallion, he filed another claim against Chris's eBay, saying that it wasn't what he had ordered. Chris replied in an absolute meltdown, telling Mr. Smith that he'd given his Sonichu medallion an angry face because of his nasty attitude. He then implored his followers not to file any cases against him because it takes money from his account and freezes it. And later on down the road, Mr. Smith would also order a piece of art, and Chris actually made a picture of Sonichu pointing at Mr. Smith with like a nasty look on his face and was like, well, aren't you Mr. Impatient, blah, blah, blah. And there's an ice bucket above the door that's waiting to fall on his head when, Mr. Smith opens the door in this drawing. And Mr. Smith filed another complaint against Chris's eBay for that one, because that's also not what he ordered. But Chris is so petty, and when he's upset or angry at someone, he doesn't give a shit. He'll just do it. Chris also ended up posting Barb's BMW on Craigslist and provided her full cell phone number, telling everyone to leave her alone. Spoiler alert, everyone did not leave Barb alone. But thankfully, that one didn't get too out of control. Chris was also seen going to a local meeting at Queer Health 101 LGBTQ Sex Fest, which that plus Chris Chan in the same sentence just makes me throw up in my mouth a little. But Catherine, the troll who had gone on that initial quote-unquote Applebee's date with Chris at the end of August, had been corresponding with Chris via email, still under the pretense that they may be dating. They emailed, not really talking on the phone or spending any time together. Just beyond that first date, at least yet. Catherine introduced Chris to Shayna, who was supposedly Catherine's best friend. So just to recap, Chris met Catherine on OkCupid. Catherine was a troll. They ended up having a real-life date at Applebee's and continued talking. Catherine also introduced Chris to her best friend, quote-unquote, Shayna, who Chris frequently emailed. And Chris emailed with both Catherine and Shayna a lot during this time, in particular, Shayna. And if you're wondering if Chris is still disgusting and obsessed with sex, take this email to Catherine on September 20th. I'm only going to summarize this because I think that this episode would probably be demonetized if I actually read out the full thing. In this email to Catherine, Chris describes how he wrapped a washcloth around a vibrating dildo and put it up his anus, trying to get some sort of sensation going there. But he's all proud of himself that he didn't stain the washcloth. But at the end, he admits that he just can't use his sex doll anymore, the inflatable sex doll. He said, I had not used it in months. The non-living things don't cut it for me as they had years ago. So basically, Chris is testing the waters with anal play by shoving things up his butt, and he's not having sex with a sex doll after he finally lost his virginity and knows what it feels like to sleep with a woman. These are things that you do not tell another living soul, much less a girl that you are trying to date. Catherine decided to make things even more interesting here and troll Chris by bringing in an outside party. In the vows that Chris had written for Catherine, he again reiterated his desire for an open relationship. This is the thing that Chris wanted. He wanted a harem of women and the ability to sleep with whichever woman he wanted. So Catherine decided to test this. She said she traveled to New York City to attend a bachelorette party where she met a wealthy guy named Colin. And Colin took her out to dinner and they rode on a boat together, his boat, I believe. And they started spending time together. Catherine reassured Chris and said, I haven't done anything with Colin and, we're in an open relationship, or you want an open relationship. How can you handle that if you're getting upset about it? So Chris started talking to Catherine's friend Shayna about it. And then Shayna told Chris that Colin was black, which normally, she did that because Chris was always super racist against black people. Remember in previous episodes and all of that. Chris didn't really comment on that. Instead, Chris got super upset when Shayna sent him a photo that was supposedly of Colin, which was actually just a model, fully clothed, shirt, long sleeve shirt and pants, in what looks like China is where it supposedly was taken. Probably not, but supposedly. And Chris got angry about it. For whatever reason, it triggered Chris, and he wanted to teach Colin about brasiers for men. Yes, that same Facebook group that Chris created that advocated for men to wear bras. Makes no sense here because the photo of Colin was fully clothed. But in any case, Chris and Shayna went back and forth a few times about it, and Shayna admitted that she had no idea what Chris's issue was with the bra. It makes no sense. And Chris actually got angry with Shayna. He said, quote, you don't get why males should be top covered? Well, for one thing, I find their breasts simply horrific and vulgar, and the nipples do not help them either. Second, a lot of males are going to end up with drooping B cup or bigger breasts anyway. Would you want those things flopping all about while they're topless? I would not. Bleck. Third, there's a major thing called modesty. Not many people like show-offs. Ugh. Super seriously, those ugly, offensive, vulgar, topless hides just get me really bad shivers and quakes, near enough to cause a freaking seizure. Males must be top covered. After that, Shayna pretty much left him alone because he lost his shit. And I'm not going to stay on this topic too long at all. But anyway, Shayna comes back. Chris apologizes for getting angry. And Chris and Colin end up contacting each other. And they get into an email fight. Chris is super shitty to Colin. And then Catherine gets upset with Chris and is like, you clearly can't take an open relationship. And Chris is like, but Colin's a bad person. And of course, the trolls are using Colin as pretty much like the actor in the trolling. So basically, Colin will quote unquote email Shayna something, and then Shayna will quote unquote share that email with Chris. So Chris is seeing what Colin's saying about him. So Colin basically said that Chris is fat, but said that he would offer to help get him in shape. And he called him out for his felony record and said that he felt that it was disturbing because Chris told Colin in the email, check me out on the quickie. Which, why the fuck would you ever do that when there's literally video of you drinking your own semen and fucking a blow-up doll? But I digress. So Colin did research Chris on the quickie and was like, it's disturbing that you have a felony record. You and your mother must have done something because public records don't lie. And Chris kept defending himself and justifying what happened to the game place and then complained to Catherine. Chris and Colin then get into a massive text message argument where Colin tells Chris that he and Catherine were in bed and that lesbians don't have penises. And that caused Chris to explode. Colin says, hate to break it to you, man, but lesbians don't have penises. They're not a really big fan of them either, lol. Chris said, my lesbian soul links better to them, and the ugly growth is easy to conceal under my skin. In Satisfactory, attributism is easy with a piercing on my taint where my clit is, city boy. Colin, you don't have a clit, you have a penis. Good luck trying to hide it if you ever manage to get some lesbian interested in having sex with you. Chris, tucking it in is easy with an empty strap on, no dildo. The sphere makes up for the faults of this ill-damned gender I was forced to be born to. Maybe I'll lend the dildo to you so you can shove it up yours. And by the way, among which, you give the males a most terrible and horrible name in your behavior. Most uncouth. Irony of the Year award. And that tax argument went on forever. In Chris's personal life, he was messing up all of his finances because he was getting more and more cases against him on eBay. Chris made a Facebook post talking about how he owed eBay $300 because they put holds on the funds for the disputes. That number came down to $150, and then an anonymous person placed an order and took care of that remaining debt. And that's the thing, is that people trolled the shit out of him, but then they also sent him money. So Chris was using money and taking money, and some people were genuinely trying to help. Other people were enablers. Some people just wanted a medallion or a piece of art from some internet celebrity that they didn't really know or hadn't been following that long. But Chris was actually making okay money. He was just spending a lot of it buying Legos and games and shit for himself. You could actually see the transaction history of him saying, I got so many orders, or I shipped this out, or I made this much money. And then he would make a post or talk about how he bought $200 in Legos. Separately, and strangely enough, we also get an explainer of Chris's fashion sense that is carried on today. Because if you've seen the pictures, I know a lot of you have, it looked Chris up now in the pictures of him being spotted around Virginia at different Walmarts. Chris is always wearing sneakers, women's tights, a denim skirt that's ratty around the bottom, and some form of shirt, usually My Little Pony, anime, or a cartoon character on it. Well, Chris explained this type of dress in a Facebook post to his Braziers for Men page back in 2014. And this explains why he currently dresses the way that he does. It says, the skirt is more loose outwardly, so even if it becomes aroused, to use the term loosely, the bulge becomes less obvious to tell. Also, I like to hide my long, ugly growth underneath my taint, tucked between the skin and my underwear. This also helps in better being able to look down and not have to look at the damn thing. So if you ever wonder why Chris wears what they're wearing, it's because they don't want their bulge to show through jeans, and a skirt helps to hide it when it's erect. Then out of nowhere, Null, the owner of the Quickie, made a post that put everything out into the open, and this came at random. Null acknowledged that almost every single person and gal pal in Chris's life was a troll. He had created like a secret forum and chat the previous year that had only been used to collectively troll and discuss Chris, like the VIP Quickie members. And he said he felt guilty and implored the people to stop trolling Chris. It's long, and I'm only going to read the second part of it. Quote, the cost of this information is too high. In the last video, Chris is so fucking pathetic and broken, it hurts. He's desperately clinging to a relationship that borders on emotionally abusive. They've had their gifts of affection stolen from the person they've given them to. He still clings to the idea of a reunion, even though he thinks that all of the people he used to know ridicule him. His mother is slowly dying. His family has ostracized him. He's had trolls pose as his very young cousin just to call him weird. He's thousands of dollars in debt, and losing $30 fucking dollars from a single PayPal case can throw off his entire month's budget. It goes on and on. And the worst part is, all of the intrapersonal problems I just mentioned are made up. He then lists a couple names. High school names, fake. This person, fake. Every person he knows is us. I'm not okay with this. I mean, compare Chris's energy in these two videos. He then links I Love You, Catherine, a newer video, and then an old one, Chris Chandler. Chris is completely drained. There's no fight there. Even the posture is different. He's sitting there, legs clasped together, hands laying limp in his lap. He's fucking burnt. In short, the decision was reached for one big reason. We're not comfortable with this anymore. Trolling Chris isn't the same as it was 5 years ago. This is the closest thing to gang stalking that has ever existed, and the target is someone who is literally retarded. But before anyone gets defensive, and I know it sounds like I'm blaming everyone, but the blame is on me. I made the board. I encouraged these people. I invited these people. And I did all of this so that I would have a say, so that I would be in the know, so that I would be important without even doing anything. And it worked. I mean, I guess I'm inner circle now. I know more than 99% of people, but at what cost? I glorified obsessive behavior. I gave people badges and gold names for it. I built an echo chamber that caused a mentality to grow in people, which was not healthy. I feel like I'm fucking evil for this shit. Now what? One of the biggest reasons I was able to mentally justify the continued existence of this board was this. If I shut it down, they will take their work and move it elsewhere. Then I don't have a say at all. This continues to be true, but I am now at a point where I believe even that would be better. There's a reason why most staff don't post here, because they're not okay with it, even the ones that do have raised issues. I don't control what you guys do, but I would implore you to stop. Chris isn't a good guy, and I know his attitude and behavior goes a long way in not caring about what happens to him. However, I would still ask you all to consider what holding this much power and influence over a single person does to him and does to you. Is Chris really being trolled anymore? Is this level of military grade effort warranted? Have what we gotten from it satisfied the effort to reaction rule of trolling? I sincerely appreciate the amount of time people have invested into what I've created. Ultimately, and sadly, I believe the fun period of messing with Chris is now over forever. I have seen with my own eyes what even the most ambitious efforts can bring about, and I don't think it's a good idea to encourage it anymore. Eventually, Null would leave the Quickie and go on to start a new website that focused on people from the internet who did stupid shit, like Abby Brown and Daniel Larson, Cyrax, and a bunch of others. It would be another website that would collect user submitted information to document these people so that they could become the laughing stock of others. Named after the incorrect pronunciation of Quickie, this website would come to be known as Kiwi Farms. And what's incredibly ironic is that it became an incredibly toxic message board, kind of online forum/community. There have been a lot of verified accounts of swatting, data theft, doxing, harassment, extreme trolling, lots and lots and lots of anti-trans sentiment and behaviors and stalking on Kiwi Farms. Look up Keffels if you want to see something that's like super fucked up. So really, really, really interesting that Null made that announcement on the Quickie and then went on to actually create a website infinitely more notorious for bullying, doxing, and all of that stuff. But that's it for this episode, y'all. We are halfway through October in 2014. And yeah, it is absolutely nuts. So what do you guys think so far of the newest saga, the Catherine saga, the taint piercing, all of that? Drop a line on the Instagram at We Saw the Devil podcast, or you can reach out on Twitter. As always, the email info@wesawthedevil.com. That's it for today, guys. Until next crime.